Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game, Develop, Repeat, the podcast where we talk about a game that I enjoy, what makes it special, and what we as game developers can learn from it. I'm your host, Chris, a music educator turned indie game developer, and today's episode is all about sacrifice. In this episode, we discuss blending genres, easy to hate characters, encouraging specific playstyles, and small twists on classic tropes. Let's get to it. Sacrifice is a game that has a very unique take on the gameplay of a real-time strategy or a war strategy game. Starting with the perspective, rather than being a top-down perspective like your Warcrafts or your Starcrafts or any of these games, your Command and Conquer, right? Rather than being that top-down management perspective, you are in the thick of it. You are in the battles. You are from an over-the-shoulder perspective managing this wizard and his armies. So you are the wizard, and you can manage your armies, and you can go around the battlefield and collect souls to strengthen your armies by summoning new units. You can cast spells into the battle, and you have to be a bit careful to protect your sources of mana. You've got these little guys behind you that channel mana to you. And if your enemy takes those guys out, you can get in trouble pretty quickly. So you have to pay attention to your positioning. You have to pay attention to your army's positioning. But this is sort of I say army, it's more like little squadrons. Like you're not going to have a huge army. You're more going to do skirmishes. You're going to do little strategic battles. And the soul mechanic is really interesting in battle because what will happen is if one of your guys dies, you get a little blue soul that you can just walk right up to it and grab it real quickly. But if one of your enemies dies, their soul is red, so it has to be converted before you can pick it up. So you can't just run in and steal your enemy's souls. You have to get enough power that you can feel safe going in there and converting it and grabbing it, or you need to get a full clear on their army or force them to retreat, right? And if you kill something that took more souls to summon, then well, you're getting more souls from converting it. So there's a lot going on in terms of the actual battle mechanics that I really deeply enjoy. There's a huge amount of value in there. Just talking about this game makes me want to go back and play it immediately. Because it's such a compelling experience, and I really want to try to get across to you how compelling the experience is, because this is a game worth looking into and finding out about just to see the kind of stuff that they executed on and just to feel the impact of the gameplay in this game. Let's talk about some of the campaign stuff and some of the lore surrounding this. So I am still going to keep it spoiler free. If you want an absolutely zero spoiler experience, then I will be saying a tiny bit about the gods and like what their interests are. But that information is given to you in the first minute of the game. So I'm really not going to be digging deep on this information. There's like a little bit of mechanical spoilering going on, but it's nothing super unanticipated. So there are five gods. There's like a life god, there's a earth god, there's like an air god who's like obsessed with knowledge. Each one of these gods has their own like thing or concept that they're obsessed with outside of their element, and it kind of shapes their entire personality. Their personalities are extremely over the top. There's also a fire god and a more of a death god. If you work with one god enough, it will close off opportunities with other gods. And each time that you complete a mission for one of these gods, it will often, I think it's every mission, but it will unlock new spells and new creatures. So you can get some really very powerful creatures by working with the right gods at the right time, and you can create some cool synergies, but that's more of like a metagaming thing. I mean, on your first playthrough, You're just going to go through and you're going to find out what you get, right? Um, the okay, so the gods' personalities are wild. They're constantly bickering. They've got this whole thing going on that adds a lot of flavor to the world, and it adds a lot of emotional investment. This is one of the things I want to talk about with this game is the gods are very emotionally compelling and engaging. You interact with them and you develop stakes because one of them, at least one of them, is going to annoy you to the extent that you want to work against them. They all have such strong personalities and they're such like they're almost caricatures, but it's done in a way where it's still compelling for me. And maybe that's because I played it was younger when I was younger, but I think it'll probably still be pretty compelling for you. I'm pretty impressed by the characterization of these gods. It is definitely over the top, but it gets you invested, and you will reach a point where you're like, okay, well, I got to work against that guy because that one is driving me crazy. But then you'll look at the one you're working for, and you're like, this one's not great either. Like none of them have a personality where you're like, I'm completely happy working with this person. They all have some major flaw, and you're just kind of picking which one you want to deal with. Um, this One of the aspects of this game that I like a lot is the fact that you collect resources through combat. I think this is very interesting. So in a war strategy, like in a standard war strategy, you've got this situation where you are fighting for resources, yes, but you're kind of fighting for bases. You're fighting for a spot to expand to. In this game, the battle is the battle for resources. You are not trying to defeat your enemies so that you can access the resources they have. I mean, that is in there too. Don't get me wrong. There is a mana thing. Um, where you do want to take over certain points in the map to gain mana, but the souls part of this is more what I'm focused on. Your enemy is a resource in and of themselves, so it makes for a much more aggressive style of gameplay. uh I tend to, when I play a war strategy, I tend to wallow. I tend to stay in one spot. I tend to just keep working on what I'm working on and kind of forget that the enemy exists. You cannot forget that the enemy exists in this game. You are constantly seeking out things to kill and take the souls of. And that is so compelling and makes for a very um, action oriented style of gameplay. You don't end up in that situation where everybody's just staying on their own for 30 minutes and farming up and getting ready, right? You end up in this situation where you're constantly skirmishing with the enemy. Unfortunately, you know what? I say this, I haven't played it online that much. I used to play against my brother on the LAN when I was growing up, and it was a good experience. It was good fun. Man, I gotta play this thing again. I gotta see if I can get this game going and get like a LAN going on it because this is worth revisiting. I don't know how I haven't talked about this already. As soon as I started writing the notes for this episode, I was like, why haven't I talked about this game yet? This is insane. This game was so incredible, and it does so many things right in such an incredible way. Okay, so availability of this game. I should mention that since I'm talking it up so much. Sorry. The game is available on GOG and on Steam. It looks like it's about $10. I did see one comment on Steam where somebody says that it didn't work for them on Steam, but it did work on GOG. Maybe read through the reviews a little bit. Check where you're at in terms of what operating system you're using and whether or not it's likely to work, and make sure that there's some kind of refund policy if you are unsure. But if this appeals to you, if this idea appeals to you, I highly recommend checking it out. What games could this be compared to? I've heard people talk about Brutal Legend as though it is similar in some way, and I don't know what the deal is there. I haven't played Brutal Legend. But I might have to look into it. If it's anything like this, then I'm gonna have to play it. If somebody has played both, let me know. Let me know what the differences are, and let me know if that one is worth picking up or trying out. Because I would love to play more games like Sacrifice. It's a beautiful experience. It's fascinating. And oh, here's the other part that I've got to talk about. The voice acting in this game is surprisingly good for its time. This game came out around 2000, and I feel like this was an era where your voice acting could be very hit or miss, and I like it in this game. It it passes the threshold for me. It's not perfect. There are going to be weird moments, right? A lot of old school video gaming voice acting can be a little sketchy, but I think that it adds more than it detracts, and that is all I ask for in an older game's voice acting. That's about it as far as the gameplay of this game itself. It is hard to cover every detail of what makes the gameplay so compelling. I recommend checking out a video of it, um, because a lot of it comes from the skirmishing. A lot of it comes from actually experiencing the combat itself, and that is a very compelling. The way that they combine combat with resource gathering is very compelling for me, and fixes some of my own tendencies when playing a war strategy game. Having said all that, let's move forward and let's talk about the lessons that we can take away from this unique and fascinating game. The first question I have is, how does Sacrifice succeed at its strange blend of genres? How does it successfully mix something like a war strategy with like a sort of a fable sort of perspective, like more of like RPG gameplay almost? How do we pull that off? I think a big part of what it's doing is it's just I think the developers knew which aspects of these games were compatible, and they didn't try to force other things in. Like, there's not really like a leveling system or anything like that, right? They didn't get stuck on that. They just went, "Oh, there's a natural progression. The leveling system is the missions that you do that unlock different units for these strategy games." So they took this idea of, like, sometimes in a strategy game you'll play the campaign and you'll unlock units as you go. Well, they took that, and that feels like the leveling system. Your wizard is becoming more powerful because he's getting more spells and summons. It kind of ties in together, which is easy to look at and go, "Oh wow, that's a great idea." But to come up with that is, I think, more of a challenge. But I suspect this is the mindset that I think might work for me if I was trying to do something like this. And I won't know until I try, so it'll be a while until I know for sure. But I suspect that what they've done is they've ignored the aspects that don't work. And I bet there was a lot of growing pains involved in that. I'd be very surprised if there were not a lot of growing pains. I bet there were things they tried that just didn't work at all, and they had to completely can it. But um, there's probably a way to approach this of like, I really want this mechanic to work, right? Like, somebody will be like, "Oh man, one of my favorite things about a war strategy game is this element." And I think if you were making a strict war strategy game, cool. But because we're trying to change this genre, because we're trying to do this whole different approach, we might just have to get rid of that element. It might not fit. And I think that is probably, in my mind, a really important factor to take into consideration when doing a genre blend. Noticing which elements of the genres are actually compatible and kicking out anything that is sort of negatively compatible, anything that is conflicting with another element, getting rid of those elements and making sure that everything is in sync and works smoothly together. I do think one of the things of this game that could have been make or break is the control scheme. If the control scheme was not good enough, this game would not work. It wouldn't be playable. I think this is an easy thing to overlook, but control schemes are the bread and butter of gaming. If you don't have a good grasp of how the player is going to be controlling the game, you're in trouble, right? Like, if the player can't control the game, they can't play the game. So it's really got to be intuitive, and I think they've done a good job of making it approachable despite the new strange angle on the game through a combination of like WASD and then like mouse usage and hotkeys, right? And well placed menus that don't cover the entire screen. That's extremely important in here. So they know what's important for the gameplay itself, and they don't destroy themselves by trying to include everything from both genres. Let's go to the next question. How can I encourage specific play styles without railroading players? And I'm thinking about this because Sacrifice encourages me to play in a way that is more fun, but I don't default to. When I play Sacrifice, I play it differently than every other war strategy. How does it encourage that? Well, it kind of makes it so that you have to do it, right? So maybe the railroading is a part of it. But it's you know what? It's not that you have to. It makes it extremely beneficial to play with the more aggressive playstyle in a way that is obvious. The core gameplay mechanics tell you like, oh, you want to be more powerful, you got to kill things. That's the deal. You just got to kill things. So if we took like an overhead war strategy game, then the equivalent of that would be, let's just take StarCraft for a second, because I think that is going to be very relatable for a lot of people. Let's say you're playing the Zerg in StarCraft. What if the Zerg, instead of gaining power through the traditional means of collecting crystals and Vespian gas and all this stuff, what if instead they grew more powerful by collecting the corpses of their enemies? Like, what if that was one of their resources? That would fundamentally change the gameplay and the gameplay style. I just got really excited about asymmetric war strategy games where each race has its own. Okay, I'm so excited about this. Imagine a great war strategy mechanic is just each race has its own resource collection method, right? I'm sure this has probably been done before. So if somebody knows somebody who's pulled it off really well, for the love of God, send it to me. I need to play this game if it exists. I have to play this game. I want a game where each race has its own unique resource collection, which puts it in direct conflict with other races frequently. I want this as like a top-down war strategy. I'm so excited about that idea. I know that I'm not going to make it. So if that already exists, let me know. If I am, if I am going to make it, it's going to be like 10 or 15 years down the road, because man, do I not have the skills, team, or anything for that yet. We are not at that place yet. But I would love to play that, but really well executed. Ooh, okay. I went on a tangent on that one. But that's an example. I guess to an extent you're railroading players if you kind of reward a playstyle so heavily that it's almost mandatory. But I don't think like technically, you know, I have this thing about like it's not railroading the players until you actually make it the only viable option, right? And I guess in a competitive environment, sure, but if you're just playing the campaign, like you can still take it slow. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like you don't have to play this way. It's just heavily encouraged and extremely fun to play this way. Ooh, that's the other part. If you can make the play style that you intend for people to do the most fun and appealing play style, then you don't need to railroad anybody. If you just make that play style very interesting and appealing, then everybody just slides right into it and you don't even have to worry about it. And they're going to be like, oh, I choose to play this way. This is a great way to play. It's really enjoyable. Okay, next question. I've got a lot of questions about this game. Are easy to hate characters valuable? I think yes. I think there are times when the answer is going to be no. There are a couple Final Fantasy characters that I hate, and I just hate them, right? And I think that's a case of like you're supposed to like them, but you hate them. I think if you know how the player is supposed to feel about the character, or you give them options on how to feel about the character, then an easy to hate character can be extremely valuable. You can have an easy to hate villain. I like the thing that Sacrifice does where there are very easy to hate characters that you are choosing to work for or work against. Um, it's compelling. It's it's very compelling, and I think that's a huge amount of value in terms of getting the player invested in the game, making them emotionally invested in, I want to beat this guy. I don't want this guy to be the winner of this conflict. I need to undermine him, even if I have to work with somebody who I also don't like, but I don't like them less. Like I hate them less than I hate this character. I think there's a huge amount of value in that. And I think even in a game like, I'm going to bring it to Stardew Valley, because Stardew Valley has incredible characters. And there are one or two that people hate. And I think it's good to have a character that you can hate and you can have an opinion on. Like every character in Stardew Valley has some flaws, right? Or like a very specific personality. And I love that. You don't need every character to have its the same like milk toast, like boring personality across the board. Like everybody doesn't need to be this blank slate for you to reflect your personality onto. We need some real character behind these guys, right? So I'm a big fan of an easy to hate character. And I think if you make a character strong, have a strong enough personality, someone's going to hate them and someone's going to love them. I think that's a risk worth taking. Okay, two more questions. What small twists can have a huge impact on my enjoyment of a game? Actually, in this game specifically, there are these small twists that they do. This is really what I'm getting at with that question because it's a little oddly phrased. What I'm getting at is this game makes some small twists on the fantasy genre. It makes it much more gritty. It doesn't put a pointy hat on the wizard. It makes the wizard look like he's kind of like seen some stuff. It looks like it's a little bit messed up. All of the gods are not like these sacred, holy, like perfect versions of something. Instead, they're just like squabbling and overly obsessed with their own thing that they just like can't step away from and get any perspective on. Like one of them is just so completely obsessed with progress in industry that he has no perspective on anything else. And one of them is so obsessed with knowledge that he has no perspective on anything else and he'll just do anything for it, right? And I think the small twist that they've done here is one, they've made the fantasy genre trope a little bit less light and playful and a lot more intense and dark, which I know people have done before, but in a gameplay setting, I really enjoyed it. And they did a lot of twists on all of the individual monsters and everything. So they've just made these small changes everywhere that make it fresh. It's not just like it's not like orcs and goblins. It's not at all orcs and goblins. Everything's got a twist to it that makes it fresh. And I think that a small twist can have a huge impact. This game happens to have a lot of twists, but I think that even a small one can have a big impact. So there's the next question and the final question. What small twists can I use in my own development? I would say small gameplay twists and little artistic twists are the easiest things to do for me. Changes to the gameplay that are a little unexpected. So, like the platformer that I'm working on has a wall sticking mechanic. That's not a brand new thing. Super Meat Boy has a wall sticking mechanic, but it's like a wall slide, right? There are other games that have like wall pauses, wall sticking, all this stuff. I fully recognize that. But I like the way that my particular mechanic is integrated into the game and the way that it interacts with a couple other mechanics. I also have two different jumps. So rather than just having one normal jump, I have a normal jump and then I have a very exaggerated, slow to launch, but very high jump, which allows me to do a lot with the level design and like mix things up. And I recognize that these are, in comparison, extremely small twists, but every tiny, tiny decision you make echoes through the whole game in very interesting ways. And I think that any small twist you use can echo through the game in a fascinating way. That's, I guess, really what I'm getting at there. So don't get stuck in. More talking to myself than anybody, but maybe this will appeal to you. Don't get stuck in on a existing trope, but feel free to use it as a starting point and start mixing it up from there, which is something that Sacrifice does well and something that I hope to do well in the future. Once I'm deeper into the art side of things and able to establish a stronger aesthetic, a slightly less minimalistic aesthetic, although I am enjoying the minimalism on this game. Let's talk about this game. Let's talk about this development thing. So I put out the demo. It's by the time you listen to this episode, it's been out for like a week, I guess. I put out the demo, and the first thing that was like a sticking point was, well, one, I couldn't like. I sent it to everybody, and everybody's like, "All right, cool. I'm gonna play it soon." And then I'm just sitting here waiting. I'm like, somebody play this game. Somebody tell me what they think of this game. Come on, man. Like, I've been working on this for like 6 months. I want some feedback. And like, I've gotten a little bit, but that's the first thing is you put that demo out there. No matter how chill you are, you're going to have that moment of like, somebody get back to me on this. Come on. Like, I'm excited. People, and I have heard back a little bit and we're working on it. But one thing that I found out very quickly, um, turns out, and y'all are going to go, yeah, of course. But it turns out the drop down menu to do a build for Mac in Unity does not automatically make the Mac build work perfectly. Imagine that. I don't have a Mac to test on. I only have a Windows computer and I have like a Linux virtual machine. So I don't really have a way to test on Mac. I kind of just have to bug my friends and be like, hey, can you see if this runs? And so far, I'm still working on getting the Mac version running. Hopefully, it'll be running by the time this episode is up. But as of the time of posting the demo, the only functional version is the Windows version. Chris from the future here, the Mac version is now functional. The Mac version works. Feel free to try out the Mac version. If you do have any issues, let me know because we've only tested it on like one computer, but it did work. Thanks. Linux is going to be a whole nother thing, partially because I just like don't really know how Linux operates. Like I'm not good at it. I have a VM for it, but I'm really not particularly familiar with it. Um, One other thing I will mention is I've really appreciated the power of just having a little bit of a game dev community by my side, right? Like I'm connected with a group called it's Distinguished Humans Indie Game Dev Club. They have a podcast. I encourage you to check them out. They're fantastic. They're on their own game dev journeys. And I like that community, and I've been engaging with them. I've also engaged with I had a question that I needed answered. I threw that out there on the Game Makers Toolkit Discord and got an answer that was about the Mac build. Hopefully the fix they gave me works, but it gave me hope. It took me from, I just give up on this Mac build to, hey, maybe I can make this work. So that's pretty powerful in and of itself. All right, that's everything I've got on the game for now. Hopefully that Mac build will be working by the time you listen to this. Feel free to check it out. If you're on Windows, please check out the game. I'm excited about it. I would love to get some feedback on it. I'd love to come back from my vacation and look and be like, oh, a couple people messaged me and said that this is what they do and don't like. By the way, I am on vacation until June the 13th, so you will not be hearing from me because I am probably out in the mountains without any kind of cell reception. All right, having said that, let's get to this week's tip. Because this week we're talking about a game called Sacrifice, I want to talk about the concept of sacrifice, specifically self-sacrifice. This is the thing I've noticed in music because I did this. There's a lot of musicians who go, I will sacrifice anything and everything to become a great musician. I don't care what I have to sacrifice. And then here's the catch. Sometimes you think that by being willing to sacrifice anything and everything, you will become successful. And that's not how it works. Success is not a product of sacrificing yourself or of sacrificing your life or anything like that. You can sacrifice all that stuff and not have it amount to anything. The real trick is to work towards the thing, right? And I know this sounds bizarre, but there is a thing that happens. There's a mindset thing that can happen where you go, well, I'm sacrificing so much, so I must be working towards the thing. No, you're not. You might just be sacrificing everything and not actually working towards the thing. Like, stop sacrificing everything. This is a little bit more of an abstract tip, but don't give up on all of these important parts of your life so that you can pursue your goal. Pursue your goal within your life. Make the goal a part of the structure of the life you want to live, because if you're sacrificing everything to develop this game, if you're sacrificing everything to create this album or this piece of art or whatever, what's going to be left to enjoy it afterwards? Like you're going to be stuck in the mindset. You're not going to be able to enjoy it anymore. You're going to be destroyed, right? It's going to be so brutal that there's not going to be anything left to enjoy the fruit of your efforts. And so don't sacrifice yourself for nothing. I would say don't even sacrifice yourself. Just consistently work towards your goals. Sacrificing yourself is not going to speed you up. In my opinion, in the long run, it's not worth it. It's probably going to slow you down in a lot of ways. If you have the mindset of self-sacrifice. Now, if you got the mindset of working hard consistently and, oh, I can't go out to dinner tonight. Sorry, I've got to work on this. That's a whole different thing. But if you've got the mindset of, I will give up everything to succeed at this, that's not leading towards success. That's just leading towards pain, in my opinion. But that's just my take. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm going to get another one recorded right after this. I'm going to go grab lunch and then record another episode. We are on a marathon today, but I'm talking about games that I absolutely love, which is kind of what I have to do in order to record 3 episodes in 2 days. It's a lot. All right, that's everything. Enjoy your week. I know I'm going to enjoy mine. I'm so excited. I'm out in Olympic National Park and I could not be more hyped on this. It's so beautiful out there. I'm traveling across the country to go there. It's exciting. All right. I'm going to stop bragging about this trip. All right. Thank you for listening. I will talk to you all next week. Have a good one.